often say it's easier to do a 3-hour talk because you can get through a lot of things. But this kind of TED type thing is you really have to make sure you hopefully hit it home in the bit of time that you have. I know it looks like I fell into the bleach when I was born, but I am an African. This is my home. I lived overseas. I came back 12 years ago. I'm raising my child here. I'm not an ostrich with my head in the sand regarding the challenges we have in this continent and the challenges we have in this country. To a large extent, in South Africa, we are still in the second industrial revolution because we're trying to produce and distribute electricity. Most of the world got it right many years ago. Although the whole idea of the 4IR, it's a name I actually hate, I think it's more the smart technology era, is something that we in South Africa and as Africans really need to grasp and grapple with. What I want to talk about today is the fact that our continent has great promise. It's one of the largest continents in the world. I'll show you a picture that when I saw it the first time I was quite amazed. But also that we as Africans collectively need to take ownership of where the smart technology era is taking us. A lot of what we are facing today, tools we're using, etc., are typically what we can call the global north. So European, Northern American, Chinese, Middle Eastern kind of tools. And to what extent will it impact our sovereignty as Africans? And to what extent is our data going outside of our continent? And what will that be used for? So I'm talking about the continent of promise. And as I said, not an ostrich with the head in the sand. A lot of problems, but there's a lot of potential here as well. Just very briefly around the agenda, I've already mentioned some of this. I just want to talk about our population growth, our demography, very young, the fact that we have foreign technological firms to a large extent colonizing our continent and our country. How do we take control of our own future? And I like what you said, Sydney, about our children, because that's really what drives us, or should drive us. What are we leaving for our children and for their children? And then just maybe ending up on a positive note, just imagine we can get this right. What kind of legacy can we leave for our kids? About a year ago, I wrote 2 articles for Business Day where I imagined that my son, he's 9 now, but in 30 years, I don't know if I'll still be here, maybe, but he would write a letter to me and to us about what world he's living in 30 years. I wrote 2 articles. The one is that they ended up living in a more utopian world, and definitely this technology has the potential to create a more utopian world, a more economically equal world. The use cases around healthcare, financial equality, and so forth, and education in particular, is immense. We can create a world where there's a lot more longevity, a lot more health, and so forth. And in this first article, I imagine him writing back and say, thank you that you guys regulated this technology, that you used it responsibly. But the second one is the one that really got to me, is the dystopian world. And I imagine that in 30 years he writes back to us saying, why did you not do more? And each of us have a role to play. We might not be the Googles of the world, but in every little role that we play at work, with the way we raise our kids, the way we speak about this technology, we have a responsibility. Will we be caught asleep at the wheel? This technology is not regulated anywhere in the world. The EU is making a lot of progress, and we're waiting for the AI Act. But in most of the world, in all of Africa, and particularly in South Africa, there's no regulatory and legal frameworks. We do have privacy in the form of PAPIA. Some of the policies there speaks about how we use data, of course, but responsibly using the most powerful technology we've ever created, and what to do around biases in our data sets, etc. No regulatory framework. It's very sad. And we have to do something about it. Now, will regulation end the misuse of this technology? Of course it won't. Will regulation potentially stifle innovation? There's a good chance for that. But I think it's something we need to think about. Because we're heading toward a world, and it's not scaremongering. The longer I work in AI, the more negative I'm becoming about it. ChatGPT was great November last year. And I think people fall on 2 spectrums, 2 sides of the spectrum. A lot of people in the last few years that I've dealt with fell on the very negative Hollywood, if you would, formed spectrum. Killer robots. Everyone's going to lose their jobs. A real dystopian world. And then the other people fall on the other side, which is it's the best thing since sliced bread. We can AI the hell out of our business and fix all of our process problems, cultural problems, leadership problems. But obviously we need to fall somewhere there in the middle. There's a balance somewhere. But what I've seen over the last year or so is that a lot of people are now AI experts suddenly, because you can just chat GPT and try and become an AI expert. And a lot of people are becoming almost, I want to say, too positive about this technology, especially the business leaders I deal with. They want to AI everything. They're not even using Excel properly yet. They don't understand their processes. You can't AI stupidity. You can't AI human experience. So I think that this balance between the role and the place of humans and the role and the place of technology is going to be an interesting balancing act as we go into the future. I don't know if you've seen this picture before. I don't know how clear it is. If we look at the continent, continental US, China, India, some parts of Eastern Europe, most parts of Europe, fits into our continent. Now we know from a colonial point of view, if you look especially at older maps, Africa was often much smaller on the map than Europe, because Europe was seeing themselves as the superpowers of the day, which they were. But the realistic picture of a world map, which hopefully most of our modern world maps will show, is that the scale of Africa compared to most of the world is massive. If you've traveled across this continent, you will know. So it is an incredibly large continent. Let's look at some of the demographies, and I'm going to just quickly run through this. 1.3 billion people, second most populated continent after Asia. 2.5% growth annually in our population. The median age is 19.7. That's young. Many places in the world you don't find such a young population. 60% of our population is under the age of 25. We're looking at, in 2050, reaching about 2.5 billion people on this continent. And then lastly, our languages and ethnicities. 2,000 distinct ethnic groups and more than 1,200 languages, although I've seen stats that there's about 3,000 dialects and languages on this continent. That's relevant to this event, because all of the platforms we use are English, maybe Portuguese or Spanish, and other languages, French maybe. But how do we serve the African population when it comes to conversational AI? What if you're living in a rural area and you maybe have a fairly okay phone and an okay network, but you're about 200 kilometers away from a doctor, and your child is sick, and you have a chatbot app where you can ask for some basic medical advice. But English is maybe your third or fourth language. Firstly, you're going to struggle to explain the problem and the symptoms that you're seeing, and you're going to struggle understanding maybe what the advice is that's coming back. The same can play a role in financial advice, financial health as well. There's a lot of initiatives in this continent and also here in South Africa, and we're going to have a chat or presentation from Jade Abbott later today, who works with Masakane, University of Pretoria, and there are others doing it as well. They're building African data sets for language models and African languages. And I think a big part of their focus currently is South African languages, but we also need to expand that across the continent. The same is true of medical imagery. If we look at breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, and others, a lot of in fact not a lot, almost all the data sets we use are from the Northern Hemisphere. And there are nuances in sicknesses that people in Africa have that you won't pick up in using 1 million pictures produced in Northern America, for instance. Breast cancer is a very good example of that. Even African American women in the US, who are 5th or 6th generation immigrants, if you would, have certain nuances around that cancer that you can't pick up from the data sets. So we have to take control of our AI future. We have to create our own data sets. We have to regulate this technology, because we are going places. And I think we may be one of the few places left in the world from a business growth point of view that's not saturated. Huge potential to grow businesses in Africa. Here's some of the problems with the loss of our sovereignty, if you would, or this colonizing of Africa. Who is currently digitally controlling our country? Does the name Huawei ring a bell? The Chinese? Imagine the control you have over a nation, over the government, if you can switch it off, or if you can limit it. What if there's a massive dispute between us and China, even a potential war? Most of our infrastructure is running on their technology. Water levels, electricity, interesting topic. More and more of our daily lives are not just digitally, but the physical world we live in is being controlled by this tech, and predominantly in our case, and in most of Africa, by the Chinese. I think it's almost too late to do something about it. Doesn't mean we have to stop. We have to grapple with this. But we have given over the power of our futures already to the Chinese, especially in our continent. That's a big problem. Surveillance is a massive problem. We know that. You know the story, you talk about mountain biking with your mate. What's on Facebook tomorrow? Mountain biking. Why is that? Because we are constantly under surveillance. Not just facial recognition cameras, but the thing that you carry in your pocket, that you hold in your hand, your smartphone, that you sleep next to, that you go to the toilet with in some cases, that you shower with to play Spotify, that thing is with us all the time. And I don't think we realize how much of what we say and do and where we go is under surveillance. Your mobile phone network harvests between 80 and 1,000 data points on you every minute. Things like your geospatial location, we know that, between the towers, where you are. If you think of our largest network that's got about 60% of the market share, they can predict who you associate with, because there's a good chance that the person you're speaking with is on their network as well. Your behavior around the apps that you access, the time of the day you access it, it can become a big problem. Now, we know that they can use that data to better serve us and better recommend products to us. But your mobile network knows more about you and me than we know about ourselves. I think banks wish they had that much information on us as well. We hope and trust that our mobile networks are dealing with it responsibly. What if there's a data breach? So behavioral science is becoming a big topic in this AI world, predicting how you will react to a product offering, for instance. But what about things that's most private to you? Your partner, your sexual orientation, your political views, how you raise your children, where your children go to school, etc. What if that information becomes publicly available? Your spending habits, your porn habits. I know none of you fall in that category, but it can become a massive, massive problem, losing that kind of control. So surveillance is a big problem. Even today, facial recognition technology struggles with female faces and darker skin tones. Have you seen that Netflix program, Coded Bias? It's worth seeing. Now, the technology has expanded a lot, but we still have a problem around recognizing non-Caucasian, non-male faces. Just a quick story, and I'm watching my time here. The narratives we tell about this technology is important, how people, especially young people, view it. I was in a panel yesterday about the future of women in AI, and why the percentage globally is so small. Because I think a lot of young ladies see technology and AI often as a very male-dominated area, which it unfortunately is. 6 months ago, my son had to do a project for school, and the title was Are Robots Our Friends? Now, he's adopted, he's a brown baby, well, he's not a baby anymore, mixed-race boy, and we sat down and we Googled robots, artificial intelligence, and things like that. And he said something that really got to me. He said, "Daddy, why do all these robots look like you and not like me?" And then I started studying and writing about it. Because most of the images we see on this technology, most of the stories that's being told, is that strong technology is associated with Caucasian men. Because it's mostly being created by Caucasian men. That's changing as well, but that's important. If you Google images that's traditionally associated with females, caregiving, etc., or even weak leadership, you will most likely see non-Caucasian women. Have you played with DALL-E yet? Or similar platforms, text to image? And I know these platforms are doing a lot to change this. Because remember, these large language models are using all the data on the internet, and I don't have to tell you that the crap that's out there is immense. If you ask DALL-E, draw me a painting in the style of Van Gogh about a leadership team, most of the pictures that come up will be of Caucasian men. If you ask it about weakness and things like that, it will be non-Caucasian women. So from an African point of view, again, we have to bring back the control of this data. The story we are telling about what it means to be smart, what it means to work in technology, to have the potential to do great things. That whole narrative we have to all work on together to change so that the news and the stories and the images that our children see change. It's still a colonial world we live in from a digital point of view. I can see you all are very excited at this moment, but there'll be some better, more exciting talks here today, but I want to set the scene about what we're heading for. So I think some of the things we can do. Create our own local tech hubs. We need to create our own talent kind of acquisition and building initiatives. And some of the people we'll hear about from today will talk about it, like Harambee, for instance, doing great things in rural parts of our country and elsewhere. Some of the smartest kids I've ever met is the work I've been doing in townships. But they will very likely often never have an opportunity to go to university maybe, or to do some sort of tertiary study, or to get an opportunity to intern at the bank, etc. Great ideas in those kids. I did an event just before lockdown called Girls in AI. It was a global event in 8 different cities concurrently. We were here at Red Hill School. Half of the teenage girls were from the school. The other half came through the Tomorrow Trust from rural areas. We mixed them up and we had different tables. And we taught them about design thinking and AI, etc. And that day was a real eureka moment for me. Not that I thought it would be different, but these girls were exceptionally smart. I couldn't tell them much about AI or digital technology. And we had to then build or design an app aligned to some of the UN goals. And here I am, this guy, sitting with these teenage girls. And they decided to build an app to fight gender-based violence. They started telling me the stories of the homes they've been growing up in. And I remember this one girl said, I want the app to have a button that if I press it, the police should come immediately. And then she said, because I never want to hear my mom scream like that ever again. And I think sometimes we are a bit in a bubble compared to how most people in our country live and most people in the world. We often have these events and we tech talk, but what about the impact on people? That human element, the balance of our place with technology is important. So a few closing thoughts. Imagine we can become a tech powerhouse. Imagine massive call centers outsourced to areas of Africa, no longer India and the Philippines and elsewhere. That would be great. It is possible if we do it right. What if we are a net exporter of technological skills and technology and not a net importer like we are at the moment? Ethical, sustainable AI practices, absolutely. It's not just government's job, although they are playing a big role. We all have to play a role there. And job creation, prosperity. So I want to leave you with this. Imagine the future. Imagine what this technology can do if we are smart about it, if we are ethical about it, for this continent, for our country, and for the future of our children. And with that, I say thank you very much. I'm going to call up the next speaker. Thank you so much.